What's going on, Bucs fans? Welcome back to another episode of Hear the Cannons, presented by BucsGameday, Sports Illustrated's one and only source of strictly Tampa Bay Buccaneers information, content, whatever you so please. We cover strictly Tampa Bay Buccaneers here at BucsGameday. My name is Caleb Skinner. I'm a writer and reporter here, and I'm joined by my lead editor at BucsGameday at River H. Wells on Twitter himself. We're here to talk about some free agency stuff. We got all the coaching hires out of the way, and that's pretty much all settled now with Grizzard now here as our offensive coordinator. And now it's time to dig into the weeds and for them to start putting together this roster. Before we get digging into it, though, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. We really appreciate you guys jumping in here with us. Go ahead and comment as well throughout the thing. Throw up any questions. If it's relevant to what we got going on, we'll be talking about it, and it'll bring up some questions for us to be able to answer that we might not even be able to think of. So really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're on Twitter, head over to YouTube, subscribe to our page. You'll get notified anytime that we are going live. We also break down not only our weekly stuff whenever we come on here and do the pod, but we also have player interviews. We have coaches interviews, press conferences, live post game, which obviously we're heading to the off season. That's not going to be a really big thing for us until training camp gets started and we get rolling back into the game atmosphere type deal. But yeah, we got all that information, all that stuff, all those videos over there for you guys on YouTube. Head over there, click subscribe, shoot us a like for any videos that you guys do enjoy. Excuse me. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the thick of things. River, as I mentioned, coaching mostly figured out at this point. Guys returning, coming back after there's interest from other places. Promoting Josh Grizzard from within to OC to take Liam's old position. So now we're getting into the thick of it. What are we going to do with this roster, man? We're looking at it. First things first. Free agency opens in about a month from now. So, and then a month from there. And then a month from there, we'll have the NFL draft, which everybody loves as well to dig in and dive into there as well. But first things first. First thing on the docket, dude, is free agency, and it's coming quicker than any of us imagined. The Super Bowl just happened. Obviously, Kansas City Chiefs got pretty much demolished by the Philadelphia Eagles, taking a
not pretty much, yeah,
taking a book out of Todd Bowles or a page out of Todd Bowles' book there, bringing 4 and getting home against Patrick Mahomes. So very interesting game that was going on there. I didn't think that was going to happen, but back to our attention on the Buccaneers now that we're here in the offseason. We've got a slew of free agents. The Buccaneers have a little bit of cap space to work with, probably around $6.6 million as of right now.
That'll get a lot bigger. Yeah,
it'll get a lot bigger. There's probably going to be some cap casualties, if you will, whether it's a Jordan Whitehead or maybe a Jamel Dean, depending on if you can find a trade partner with either of those two, either way, or you wait them and get that money back. But just looking at some of these guys, River, you've got on offense we'll get into the two big names later that we're here to talk about, obviously, in Chris Godwin and Lavonte David. But looking at the opposite side of the ball, you've got Ben Bredesen, Sterling Shepard, Justin School, Sua Peta, Robert Hainsey. So you got some 3 guys there on the offensive line that are depth pieces, and then also Royce Newman, who is also an unrestricted free agent as well. Kyle Trask, your backup quarterback, and then Chase Edmonds, who is your 4th string running back this past year after suffering an injury last
season.
season.
Fans probably haven't heard that name in a little bit. Yeah,
kind of got shuffled to the back of things there.
With the injury,
injury, and then the emergence of Sean Tucker that we saw this year as well. And then you go over to the defense side of the ball. Anthony Nelson, really your starter there, who kind of as the year progressed, you started to see Anthony get more and more snaps over JTS, who is also one of those unrestricted free agents, along with William Gholston, Greg Gaines, KJ Britt, Shaq Barrett, Eric Banks, Bryce Hall, who obviously missed all of last year with his injury, Mike Edwards, who was brought in, Ryan Neal also, Tavier Thomas, and Troy Hill. So just going off of those names, I know I just threw a lot out there all at once to you, River, but any of those guys that you could see that the Buccaneers would want back in 2025, and any guys that they would potentially be okay with letting them walk?
Yeah, there's a few. I think Ben Bredesen plays some pretty good football, to the surprise of a lot of people, I think. And with that in mind, I think they're probably going to try and get something together there, because if you don't get Bredesen back, You're going to have to find another interior offensive lineman, which you could do in theory. But there's a lot of chemistry on that line, and I think if he played good football, you're going to want to keep him on the roster. So they'll figure out something there for sure. And then Anthony Nelson, I think, is a really good depth piece. I don't think he should be taking as many snaps as he did, perhaps. Right. But I think you can get him for a bit of a cheaper cost, and you can ensure that he stays as a really fresh rotational guy, which I think he's thrived in that role a little bit the past few years. So interesting questions. I know JTS, Johan Shank, is definitely one for sure. And what happens there will be interesting. I just saw a comment here from Christopher Cole. Bulls will want JTS back. JTS can do a lot of different things. He can drop into coverage. He can rush passer, but whether he does one of those things particularly well is up for interpretation. And at this point, if you're trying to get some more depth into your edge rushing room and maybe add another edge rusher in free agency or the draft, a player like that would probably fall by the wayside. So,
and like sticking there just for a second, River.
Mm-hmm.
This past offseason, the Buccaneers declined the 5th-year option for JTS with the understanding that you're going to have to prove yourself to be able to earn this contract.
Yeah.
And ultimately, in my opinion, he had opportunities early on in the year to be able to do so, but you never really saw it come to fruition as the year went.
Yeah, this whole edge rushing room, and we talked about this in the pod a few different times, but Jason Light likes to draft a lot of these raw edge rushers who have this high upside and who need to be developed. And if they are developed, they have a really high ceiling. But that hasn't been happening in Tampa Bay. The Bucs have not been developing these edge rushers. JTS has not developed really much at all over the last 4 years. And then guys like Diaby have had some really good seasons. 2 years, so early to tell for him. But, high pressure guy, not a lot of sacks. Wanted to see a little bit more of Chris Braswell this year. He was a rookie, so he could improve. But really, it's going to beg the question, are you going to keep taking chances and draft picks on these type of players when it doesn't look like they're being developed? Right. And maybe that's when Jason Light goes into free agency to get another edge rusher. And if he does, then players like JTS probably wouldn't be very secure on the roster in that case. So
yeah, and it seems like it's an area where they haven't hit in the past when it comes to the NFL draft. So maybe it is time to move away when you're really good at hitting in other areas.
Right.
To different avenues and look.
Right. And that goes for a few different things. There's linebacker too. I know you mentioned KJ Britt, and I don't think KJ Britt is probably going to be back this year. Didn't play incredibly well in his full season starting. Coverage is a problem. And in this Todd Bowles defense, you need to be able to cover as an inside linebacker. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later because it wasn't good on either front in 2024. But KJ Britt's young and doesn't look like he's the answer. So I don't know if he'll be back either. So we'll see.
Yeah, and interesting names across the board. Some guys that were interesting pieces. Bryce Hall would have been a great keep. It would have been great to have him this year.
It would have. Cornerback depth is something that they got to think about too, because I know you talk about potentially Jamel Dean being a cap casualty. And while I agree on the surface, you could argue that Jason Light traded away the team's best corner last year and then paid for it during the season. So having that cornerback depth is going to have to be solid, because otherwise, if you trade away Jamel Dean or you release Jamel Dean, now where are you? You guys only have McCollum, and then you've got not much else. So if you plan to do that in free agency of the draft, that's one thing. But the more we talk about adding external free agents, the more we got to talk about keeping your own. So that's kind of what this whole thing's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little on the offensive side, there's a lot of depth pieces on the offensive line. Talked about School, talked about Apeta, Hainsey, and Newman. Obviously, Bredesen, the big name there. But you're going to want to shore up that depth too, because we were confident in that heading into this year, with the offensive line being one of the top units of one of the deepest and one of the top units for the Buccaneers this season. And they proved it, that they were. I mean, the guys, when they did miss time, guys were able to step right in. You saw School step in admirably whenever Wirfs was out for those couple of games and performed well. Like, obviously, it's not up to the level of Tristan Wirfs, but like, these guys know the system. They've been together for a long time, so I could expect them to at least keep a couple, or if not a few, of these guys. And then it'd be interesting to see what they do with Sterling Shepard, knowing what the wide receiver room currently looks like. And we'll get into that a little bit later, because one of the big names is obviously Chris Godwin.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that is interesting to me. We'll see what they do. They like to keep that continuity across the offensive line. We've seen when they haven't had that continuity, it hasn't been as good.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they'll try and get to work with Bredesen, and if not, there are other options. But I have a feeling they'll definitely come to.
And then
come
we
to
entered last season under with is it going to be Opeta or is it going to be Bredesen?
Right.
So
yeah. And then Opeta, I don't know if Opeta is going to come back just based on that unfortunate injury. But they'll have to get some depth there too. They might draft another interior offensive lineman. They might grab another one in free agency. So, but at the end of the day, I think Bredesen is probably going to end up coming back. I think they like what he did. I like what he did. I thought he played good football. And with this line being as good as it was, and room to grow too, Cody Mauch going into another year of football, Graham Barton coming in on his second year, he'll only be improved. A lot of these rookies, they take their first rookie year, the offseason just preparing to be drafted. And then next season, you get your full first NFL offseason, and you can see some big jumps from year 1 to year 2 because of that. So excited to see what Graham can do. And I think he'll want guys like Bredesen who have helped him and taught him things last year and coming into the next year.
Yeah, when you got the guy, especially, as a center, having the guys next to you that you've grown this communication all like just through 18 games or 17 games is you replacing that is hard. You got to re-examine or reevaluate like how this person likes to talk whenever you bring in somebody new or how they like their cadence to be, do they like to be tapped? Do they not? This sort of thing goes into it. And then Bud Cannabis brings up a good point. Will Gholston as well possibly play his last Tampa snap?
Yeah, probably. I think. And at that point, you'll have to get some more depth in the interior defensive line. But to be honest with you, I think that's probably the one spot on defense where they don't need a ton of help. I think everywhere else, edge rusher, corner, safety, inside linebacker, you need people. You need someone there. Someone to be with Antoine Winfield Jr., someone to partner with Zion McCollum. A lot of these rooms are kind of halfway built. And I think the draft's going to be very defensive heavy. I think it's going to bring in some new people for Todd Bowles to play around with. And it's also for Todd Bowles, if you get talent, it's time to show something. And this defense needs to be better, not only than it was last year, but than it has been in the past few years with Todd Bowles, a head coach.
Yeah. It's been rough sledding here and there. And, staying on this train, obviously Will Gholston has been a Buccaneer for pretty much ever. I mean, he's always been here, always been solid guy in the locker room, solid depth piece. Even when he was a starter, he was great. So it'll be sad to see him go. But I think that's one of those things for him where it's a retirement thing more so than like I'm going, to the next home.
I think so. And it gets to a point sometimes when you're a player like Gholston that you've played in one place for so long. And I don't know, obviously, but it's probably not super appealing to go to another market and play years after years. And I think that also, when you talk about free agent decisions, that factors in too. You've got your roots here. You've got potentially your kids in school. Even further, it's tough to want to just go play somewhere else. So maybe he will. And maybe if you think you've got football left in the tank, then that's something that you do. And I wouldn't blame him at all for that. But I don't know if he'll be back next year. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And let's dig into it, man. The two big ones. We'll stick on the defensive side of the ball because it kind of intertwines with the Will Gholston conversation. And that's, is Lavonte David done? Is he going to retire? Because we know he's not going to go anywhere else. He's one of those guys that it's either here or nowhere. Buck for life, whatever you want to call it. Lavonte David is going to either be playing in Tampa Bay or he's just going to be enjoying watching football from his couch at home. What do we see happening there? Because he did post on social media. A lot of fans looked into that and like, oh man, doesn't sound great. But then again, he could have just been like reminiscing on his past year, reminiscing on his career, which is fine. But sometimes people get out of that. They're like, oh man, I wish, I was still on the field, blah, blah, blah. What do you see happening with that? And if so, are the Buccaneers, I'm assuming they would just keep bringing him in on these 1-year contracts, right? So it's not really going to be a huge money hit for the franchise at all.
No, it wouldn't. And we saw some really good flashes of Lavonte David this year, of vintage Lavonte, because he's just such a cerebral player. He's so smart on the football field, and his predictive abilities are, always astounding to watch, honestly. This is a tough question. The Bucs are officially, I think, at a place where answering this question becomes very difficult. PFF is not word of law, obviously, but if you look at Pro Football Focus and their coverage grade, 59.5 coverage grade. He definitely regressed in that area. He's responsible for guys like tight ends, cover the middle, and he's noticeably slowed down a step in his old age. And he still makes these incredible plays based on his predictive abilities and, forced fumbles, punch outs, good run defender.
Excellent
but this
tackler.
excellent tackler. This Todd Bowles defense, it requires a lot of finesse at the inside linebacker position. And you do need that instinct too. Devin White could be a guy that's got a lot of finesse, but didn't really have the instinctual prowess to cover. Right now, we're kind of seeing the opposite of that, almost Lavonte David. And I think every Bucs fan wants Lavonte David to be a Buc for as long as possible. One of the best, one of my favorite Bucs players of all time. As far as back as I can remember watching Bucs games, 54 has been on the screen making plays.
Yep.
But if Lavonte David wants to come back and he thinks he's got more in him, and we talked to him during an open locker room once they were cleaning out their lockers after the Commanders lost, and his tone of voice and the way he spoke didn't make me feel like he wanted to stop playing football. But if that's the case, the Bucs got to make a decision. Do you want to get younger there? Do you want to try and find two coverage linebackers that perhaps are faster and can, go sideline to sideline easier? And yeah, Christopher Cole, you're right. LVD did have a lot on his plate last season, especially when guys like KJ Britt didn't play up to standard. And then you rotated JJ Russell in, and Russell's been more of a practice squad sort of guy. And then
Servassier go out with the injury.
And Servassier was their third down kind of coverage linebacker.
He was looking great.
He was. And it seemed like going into the year, that was the plan, was for him to be in that role. And then once he left, I guess they had no contingency plan whatsoever once he went down. But they're going to have to ask a question there. And I think the Bucs, obviously they want Lavonte David to be a Buc for life. And they mentioned, Jason Lights mentioned that there's a silhouette of a Bucs player in a giraffe room, and in his mind is Lavonte David. And that you don't say that very lightly about somebody, but that's a big decision to make. So I'm curious to see what they do. I don't know what you think about that, but I think eventually the dam's going to break on that, and whoever flinches first would be an interesting question to see.
Yeah, the way I look at it is whoever you bring in going to be better.
Yeah.
And not only that, but at the end of the day as well, you've got a lot more pieces to fix there in that room, right?
Yeah.
Corners. Servassier has been dealing with injuries these past 2 years. Like it's just been like one thing after another for him. He's a great player when healthy. Don't get me wrong. Probably one of the top coverage guys. He lays the wood, really great. But
just never healthy.
He just hasn't been healthy. And if he is fully healthy, that adds to the dimensions of the inside linebacker room and the linebackers as a whole. But outside of that, like you have so many other issues, I think, for the Buccaneers, that Lavonte is the least of your worries. If he comes back, he comes back, and you'd probably prefer him too. If I'm Jason Light and the rest of the brass in the front office, I'd rather him come back because I don't want to have to worry about having to fill his role too. Because not only does he bring it on the field every day, he brings the effort, even if he's not 5 years ago or 7 years ago, LVD that we're used to flying around the field, making all these plays. He still might not be that guy, but his IQ, like you mentioned, River.
It's unrivaled. It's unrivaled.
You can't really match that. And I think they'd much rather have that back and be able to like fill spots around him and to be able to supplement what they are able to do at that level.
Yeah.
Instead of having to worry about, not only that, but now we've got to fill the on-field stuff, but the extracurricular stuff that happens on the field, leadership, in the locker room, the character, as you spoke about, there's a silhouette that is Lavonte David in the Buccaneers or in one Buc place. So do you really want to go search for a leader on defense? Like there's guys that can fill that role. You think of an Antoine Woodfield, maybe a Jamel Dean, but he's really not that type of guy. But you're just starting to think of these veterans, maybe a Vita Vea-ish type guy. And
eventually it's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to happen. It just depends on how soon you want it to happen, and maybe it's not that soon. Maybe it is. So that'll be an interesting question. Yeah, that's a good point, bud. It depends on what Lavonte David wants to do afterward, but like we've mentioned, that IQ is incredible, and I think a lot of players have a lot to learn from a guy like him, and I'm sure every young inside linebacker in college and in the NFL probably would not mind taking pointers from LVD.
No, I mean,
So
it's even when we had all these undrafted free agents out, for rookie minicamp. Kalen DeLoach was speaking extremely high about how lucky he is, and he's grateful for the opportunity to be able to learn from a great like a Lavonte David.
I'm sure if you're a player, it's incredible. Just to hear what he's done and what he knows and how he sees the field. It's up there with the greats, It's up there with Luke Kuechly. I think it's up there with Patrick Willis. It's not as
and the numbers speak even greater than that, but just the value period.
Yeah, for sure.
And then,
why don't we talk about the other one, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and put it down that I think Lavonte is going to be back. Just going to put that out there. But yeah, let's go over to our other cornerstone piece here. And that's on the opposite side of the ball, and that's wide receiver Chris Godwin. Obviously, coming off his second serious injury this past year, midway through the year, that game against the Ravens, however you look at it, maybe they shouldn't have been in the game, maybe they should have, whatever, it happened. The Bucs had to deal with it. They dealt really well with it, actually. But now it was a contract year for him. He was on a career path this last season.
Potential All-Pro,
Potential All-Pro, potential Triple Crown. Eyes on that. He was in first, second, or third in many of those categories in the league when he went down. And then you go back to, the end of 2021? Where he tore his MCL and ACL and his knee,
and he got extended after that too. So there's precedent for this.
There's precedent. It's something that happens, but he is a very valuable piece to what the Buccaneers like to do on offense. Again, high IQ guy, knows where to position himself on the field, trying to get open. Great route runner, great hands, tough physical, great blocker, very valued in his blocking, in my opinion. Not really looked at as a blocking wide receiver, but he's great at it.
Oh, he does. He puts his feet in the dirt and he gets it done.
So where do we go?
He's a Renaissance man. Yeah.
Where do we go with this? Because I've been split. I can see the Bucs wanting to go a different direction, but I could see them keeping him. And I think if he's able to rehab at a faster pace than perhaps the last serious injury he had, that makes you a little bit more solidified or confident in that he'll be able to get back to 100% sooner rather than later. But I'm split here. I don't know what they should do.
What they should do is a good question. I think what they will do is I think they will bring Chris Godwin back. I think they will get to a deal. I think it'll probably be similar to how it happened with Mike Evans, and that before free agency happens. Oh God, of course. Before free agency happens, they'll probably get it done. He fits really well into this offense. He fits really well into this sort of West Coast new, and by West Coast I mean more so the actual West Coast than the football fundamental West Coast. Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan sort of thing. And Christopher Cole, you're right. Godwin will have a lot of money in suitors, but at the same time, I think Godwin likes being here. I think there's definitely a culture thing in Tampa Bay that guys like Mike Evans have been lured back with. And I don't know if he'll take less because I think the Bucs usually do right by their guys, but I think he'll be back. Now, on the should he be back thing, I don't think anyone's going to argue that Godwin is not a phenomenal football player. And then when he's not phenomenal, he's cooking in this offense in ways that, getting in space, that short game. I think the Bucs missed a lot of that when he left, being able to hit those underneaths and being able to really open up the defense.
Right. Those little easy 5-6 yards.
Yes, exactly. And I think that sort of thing was missed when he was gone. Godwin's 28. Mike Evans is 31. You'll have Evans on a big contract. You'll have Godwin on a big contract. And you've already got Tristan Wirfs on one. You've already got Baker Mayfield on one. You've already got Antoine Winfield Jr. on one. And you need to develop this defense. And you need to get to a point where you believe that they can contend for the playoffs and potentially a Super Bowl. Does re-signing Chris Godwin put a damper on that as far as free agency goes? It could. And at the same time, you would have players that would be older, on your team that are taking up a lot of cap space. And this is probably going to be one of the last big deals that Chris Godwin takes. It's going to be tough. It's an interesting situation because I think Chris Godwin's a great dude. He's a fantastic culture fit. The whole team loves him and rallies behind him, and you can tell he really cares about this organization in the game of football, and you want a person like that in your locker room. But if you want to address corner and you want to address safety and you want to address inside linebacker and now you need edge rushers, you can gamble and hope that you hit on every single one of those positions in the draft. But that's going to be tough. So I have no doubt that they can get some money cleared. You can extend guys like Mike Evans, Luke Gedeke could get an extension and clear some money. You could restructure contracts, perhaps Tristan Wirfs or Baker Mayfields. You could open up some cap. Chris Godwin can sign back with the Bucs, whether it be $22.5 million a year or whatever. It can happen. Do you want to invest a lot of money into receivers on your offense who are still producing and still quite good? Make no mistake. Mike Evans, when he was playing, still proved himself to be an extremely reliable number one option. Chris Godwin was on pace for a fantastic year. Do you want to have receivers that are aging at that point that could potentially prevent you from making bigger splashes in free agency? That's a question that the Bucs have to ask. Jason Light is always big on his draft picks. He likes drafting talent. At some point, you'll have to consider whether or not that talent's developing or not, and whether or not for the future you can build that. So, are the Bucs all in? Are they not all in? Where are they? That they're going to have to find that identity for themselves. And once they do, and I think they will re-sign Chris Godwin, they're going to have to hope that they can replace a lot of these players and get the depth they need on defense to be able to contend. Because otherwise, if you get a lot of these defensive lapses you had in 2024, you're going to go 10-7 again, and you're going to get knocked out of the playoffs again. So, interesting to see what happens. But for my money, I think Chris Godwin's going to be back in red and pewter.
Yeah, and Leroy brings up an interesting thought. He said, I thought we saved money by re-signing Godwin.
In the short term, you absolutely would.
Right.
Yeah. You definitely would. And that's key too. But then you can push things down the line, and depending on how much that contract is, those things get backloaded and they get a little bit more problematic towards the end. So, but let's talk about what do you say?
Who?
Oh, yeah, so the New Orleans Saints. It's not as bad as the New Orleans Saints, guys. I promise you. They're below cap hell, wherever that is. But yeah, I think Mike Greenberg with the Bucs, fantastic assistant general manager, big cap guy. He's always really good about this sort of thing. We've seen him time and time again be able to move contracts around and get things done, and not in a New Orleans Saints way where you're basically dooming yourself for the next decade. Bucs have navigated the post-Tom Brady dead cap hit era very well. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them finagle it in a way that makes sense, but it's still a question I think to ask and go forward. And, guys like Greenberg are the people that make that happen. And lost John Spytek, unfortunately, to the Raiders, who's on the scouting side, but having Greenberg by Jason Licht's side is another big boon for Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if Chris Godwin comes back and they can get to those other positions, you'll know why. It's probably a lot to do with him.
Yeah, and just to quickly end this off here, Leroy said this earlier, and I didn't bring it up because I kind of wanted to save this for the end. He brought up free agency signings, sign edge, a vet starting cornerback, and then draft in this order: linebacker, corner, safety, guard. Just to kind of give your brain some thought process here.
Yeah.
Where do you see the Buccaneers going in free agency and then potentially the draft as well?
This is tough because they need everything on defense. So I feel like draft could be BPA on defense. There's a lot of really good corners and edge rushers that might be available there. But then again, when you talk about edge rusher, you got to think about whether you can develop these guys. I've seen a lot of Shamar Stewart mock drafts, Texas A&M, really raw player, huge explosive speed, great Senior Bowl week, not a big sack producer, and you're going to have to teach him a lot. And can this team do that will be a big question. So when thinking about an edge rusher, that's what you got to think about. Maybe you go to free agency to get a more established name who already knows your pass rushing moves, who already has experience. I think that would be the better option. But Jason Licht has also run a really, really tight ship and has done fantastic. So that's up to him.
Any potential trades for a not to be named defensive edge rusher?
Yeah, sometimes there's these not to be named defensive edge rushers who are going to command $38 million a year. Now, Myles Garrett, that doesn't seem like a very Jason Light thing to do. My thoughts on that is that if you can get that done, I don't know why you wouldn't. We've talked a little bit about Myles Garrett, but even if it's not a Myles Garrett, guys, even if it's like a Trey Hendrickson in a trade, even if it's a Josh Sweat in free agency who's going to command a lot of money after having a fantastic Super Bowl, made a nightmare out of Patrick Mahomes, and they like that in Tampa Bay.
Likely could have been the MVP.
Yes, for sure. So it doesn't have to be a guy like Myles Garrett, but someone who doesn't need a lot of their raw, developmental traits really coach, because the Bucs have not done a good job of that at all. So free agent corners are always possible. I do think, I think Leroy, to really answer your question, it should be a combo of something that you said. You mentioned corner, you mentioned edge rusher. They should either go free agency for one and then draft the other, or vice versa. It would probably be easier to go free agent edge rusher and then draft a corner, because I think the Bucs have done a really good job developing corners, and I think there's a little bit less of
They've had success in drafting corners. Jamel Dean drafted by the Bucs. Carlton Davis drafted by the Bucs.
Pikey Smith looked pretty good this year.
Smith,
so
Zion McCollum.
and there's a lot of options there.
Sean Murphy-Bunting was drafted by the Bucs. Got a good deal in free agency. So
a lot of feel there. I mean, I know Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame's been a hot name there. And you don't even have to go necessarily in the first round, but it's got to be a defensive heavy draft guy. It's got to be a defensive heavy offseason. Free agency, draft, you got to get guys in there. That's going to be the main side of the ball that you look at, because if you want to compete, that was a big missing piece. Top 5 offense in the NFL bouncing the wild card round does not ring very nicely, does it? So I think definitely got to look at that defense, and we'll see if they can do that while retaining Chris Godwin, because I think they will.
Yeah, it's heating up, man. We're closing, closing in on everything that's about to be football season again. You get the 1 month.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. 1 month break, and we're just searching for content to get out for you guys. And
I don't know what I'd do with myself.
River just put out a 5-round mock draft for us at BucsGameday. So head over to BucsGameday.com, guys, and check that out with a slew of other
if you
stuff.
Like it. Let me know if you do. Let me know if you don't. Yeah.
Comment on his stuff. Shoot him a DM on Twitter. Let him know that he's stupid and everything.
Absolutely, right in there. Yeah.
But no,
you can't get banned on Twitter now, so go for it.
Plenty of Tom Brady stuff out right now. Of course, lots going on with that, and in his offseason, what he's going to be doing. So, I mean, just a lot of post Super Bowl, just examining how the year went and starting to gear up for the NFL draft and free agency. We're really looking forward to sharing it all with you guys. So if you are watching on Twitter, head over to our YouTube, guys. Type in Bucs Game Day. We're here, the Cannons. This is our podcast that we do weekly. So whether it's Wednesdays or Thursdays are usually our nights. It kind of depends on how we're able to work it out with all of our guys whenever we are available. We have a regular life to live on as much as everybody else does, even though you guys see us everywhere and having fun doing these videos and writing content. But we really do appreciate you guys tuning in, reading our stuff. It means the world to know that the crew is out there reading your stuff, paying attention to it, and we're able to bring you guys all that very knowledgeable, in-depth information surrounding the Buccaneers, as well as the entertainment factor as well. We like to keep you guys entertained while we're doing it. So head over to our YouTube, Bucs Game Day, subscribe to us, like our videos, and then head over to BucsGameday.com. Check out some of our articles. We got a great crew over there writing for us, and we're just continuing to push out content leading up to this offseason and everything else. But with that being said, this is River H. Wells. I always do that, man. I still don't know your middle name, but
my author name. Yeah.
There you go. River Wells, our lead editor and writer over at Bucs Game Day, along with myself at CHS on Twitter. My name is Caleb Skinner. I'm a writer reporter here at Bucs Game Day. And with that being said, River, fire the cannons.
Fire them.